Are you a teacher looking to move into instructional design, but aren't sure exactly how your skills transfer? Do you believe your experience only relates to the K-12 setting? Well, we're here to show you how your skills as an educator can actually translate to ID, where we take a teacher resume and morph it into one for ID as well. Come watch. So a simple Google search of the phrase teacher skills and instructional design revealed that teachers have plenty of overlapping skills with the ID world, such as content creator, research and evaluation, lesson planning, course creation, and project manager. And that's just 5 skills, there's plenty more. So the question of the day is, as a previous educator applying to these ID jobs, how do I showcase these skills on my resume? Well, we're in luck. We actually have a teacher resume today that we're going to use and transform into ID. And to help us speak into this process, we have 3 different experts who are going to give their expertise from their different fields and how it should work. So let's go ahead and bring up our resume. So this is actually an old resume. This is my old teacher resume that we're going to use. So what we've done is we have my old resume, and then I formatted it into a different format. And so what I want to do is I want to ask right away, my first question is, what does the format look to you as somebody who would be hiring an instructional designer? Does it catch you? Does it look good? And so I'm going to just go ahead and call out somebody and see what you think, and go ahead in the process to just introduce yourself, what's your experience, and where are you qualified to speak into this process. And I'm going to just popcorn Kenna Miller.
Sure. My name is Kenna Miller, and I'm a senior instructional designer here at LAPU. I also have background in business and HR, so may not necessarily have a lot of experience with teaching, but I can share some experience as far as what I would look for from an HR perspective, or if we were going to bring someone onto our team, what I would be looking for in those cases. So my initial feedback is that the format is important to an extent. You definitely want it to be something that is organized and very easy to read and get the information that you need to make decisions and to really understand who the person is. So I think both of these resumes do have a really nice format. I would say also, depending on where you hire, a lot of AI tools are used nowadays to screen resumes. So a couple tips are to send your resumes in PDF format, because a lot of times Word format does not process correctly, and depending on the software, it may not be read correctly. And then the other tip I also have is try to make it as easy to understand as possible. So try not to have a whole lot of text boxes and those types of things, just because it does make it a little bit more difficult for AI to screen, and you don't want to be, tossed out just because the AI tool didn't catch everything that you actually have on there. So those are more technical tips. I really like the style of both of the resumes so far, and I'm really excited to jump into how we are going to adjust this resume to fit a little bit more of an ID role.
No, yeah, thank you, Kenna. Those are actually really good tips. I didn't even think about how AI would, especially if you're a hiring manager, you have thousands of resumes to go through. So using that tool to filter through is a good idea, but how to work with that tool also that's a really good tip. So thank you. So next we have Dr. George Hanshaw. Same question to you. Go ahead and introduce yourself. What makes you qualified as well, and then just as well, regarding the formats. What's your initial thought process when seeing these resumes? Let me go back to the other one as well too, so you can see.
Hey, all right. Well, I personally like the new format, and my name is George Hanshaw. I'm fortunate enough to be able to hire IDs, so I've been able to hire several IDs, and I want to first echo Kenna's comments about getting past the AI, because I won't even see the resumes until they're filtered through HR. So if you don't have the right keywords, or if it's in a format that AI can't make sense with it, it's not even going to get over to me. And then from there, you want it to look good, because you're an instructional designer, right? So we don't want just a generic resume, you want it to look good because I'm going to see the full resume, not just what the AI part sees. I'll be able to see it. And that's a first impression. So your resume is making that first impression. And from my perspective, looking for somebody who I want to engage in a creative and analytical way, because we kind of have both. And teachers bring that to the table as well, having both that creative outlet and that very analytical outlet. I want to see some of that in the resume. And that's why I like the way the second one's put together, because we have the icons up on the top. You have the sidebar, and it's just kind of shows that you know how to disseminate information that is easy to take in, that's easy to digest. So that'll relate to the students, the learners that we're going to do. So really, the resume, by the time I get to see it after it gets through HR and all the AI content, I get to take a look at it, and the way it looks is a first impression.
Mm-hmm. So AI keywords, make sure your resume is hitting those keywords so that it gets filtered through, gets approved, good A-OK. And then once it gets to you, you want it to be appealing and make sure it looks good. So this guy back here, maybe is a no-go based on the format. Cool, okay.
Yeah, for me, that's like hitting a wall, because it's just that wall of text. I'm like, oh man. But when I see all those bullet points and different stuff everywhere, I can take in those chunks of information really quick. And, I won't dismiss any of them. I'll read them all, but that first impression, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference.
Good to know. Thank you. And so now we have Victoria Bai, and Victoria has a unique perspective for this too, because she's coming from well, I'll let her talk about it. Victoria, same question to you, and just who are you as well?
Hi, and thank you, Matthew. I'm Victoria Bai, a former teacher, now transitioned into an instructional designer. And Matthew, I'm echoing what Dr. George and Kenna has mentioned, is the layout. The first one, for lack of a better word, it's just too simple. It's kind of boring. The second one, if we can go back, what laid out to me is you have a nice color scheme going where it's minimalist, but the color blocks mesh it nicely, where there's 3 different colors that highlight the different sections between your education, skills, and your chunk of experience. And I like how because you chunked it into smaller segments of bullet points, it gets to the point, but doesn't compromise on the detail. So that's great. But what I do notice and also to mention, after this goes through the ATS, then the human reader sees it, the ATS, the applicant tracking system bot. And immediately as the human reader, I've noticed that there's still a lot of teacher jargon left on here, such as immediately something that caught my eye: lesson planning, IEP, and taught. Those are great verbiage and vocabulary for teaching jobs, but in the ID role, that probably would not get past the ATS before we are able to see your resume, because IEP is not used in ID jargon. Big deal for teachers, though.
Well, that brings up a great point, Vic, and I think because you have that unique perspective where as a teacher, and I think this is something that I struggled with too, and I think many of our viewers too, if you're a teacher looking to go into ID, is, okay, how do I change that? Because I know for me, IEPs were like sometimes half of my day, but it involved lawyers, it involved so many stakeholders, it involved so much paperwork. It was very litigious in this process. So how would I get this and change it to an ID world? And I think that's a great question to start. Let me get out of here and go to yes, Kev, we're having a great experience. Thanks. So let me get out of here. So then my question for you guys is, how would I change this language to represent the experience that I had, but it still fits ID? So that way it goes through the AI, it hits those keywords, and then when you see it, you see in a resume it's now well formatted, it looks good to you, but you read experience that relates to the job description that you put on. So you want somebody who's going to help create courses, somebody who's going to help with project management, different things like that. What should I do? How should I change this language? Do you guys want to popcorn somebody again, or is there anybody who wants to volunteer to go first? I'm gonna popcorn somebody. Last time I did Kenner first. We'll go with Dr. George Henshaw. Go for it. Looks like he wanted to say something. Anyways, come on.
Hey! I was slow on the trigger. I was slow. One thing that I noticed on the far right under your skills, you have educational technology, leadership, LMS, ADDIE, and UDL, Universal Design. Those are all key words that will probably be in most instructional design job descriptions, right? Especially UDL. We want to make things more accessible for everyone. So I would actually pepper some of those keywords within the About Me section where I show what I did with those skills, or put it more in the experience level as well. So they're throughout multiple places. So let's say, because usually an instructional designer gets hired by a team. So I'm not the only one reading it. Other folks on the team are reading it as well, and they're going to read differently. So I want to make sure that those keywords are placed in several places along the resume as well. So they have a firm understanding that I know how to, that I understand the ADDIE model, UDL strategies, how I implement those. So I just would want to make sure that all of those key things that I got from the job description were well versed and well displayed within the resume.
Oh, that's a good point. So not only keeping it to one spot, but making sure, okay, how was that actually displayed in my experience? Show me how you did it in your previous job, essentially.
Yes, absolutely. Kind of give me the what you did with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I have a question for Vic. So knowing now that we want these skills to be in our experience, and you said you saw language like IEP, maintain classroom, created schedules, etc. As a teacher, how would I use these skills and change the language in my actual experience here to fit these things? Or Kenna too, if you could speak into that, like what would be a better phrase to put? Because she's right. If I type IEP paperwork, like I don't know if Kenna, when she sees that, she's like, okay, I don't know what an IEP is, or Dr. Hanshaw is going to be, okay, IEP, cool. What does that actually do? How does that match UDL? You know what I mean? So how could we change that language to be reminiscent of these skills?
Can I say something on that one?
Say whatever you want, Dr. Hanshaw.
It's something that just kind of popped into my head hard, especially now with our AI technologies that we're all using within instructional design. We're able to build individual learning experiences for people. So what you're doing with an IEP, now correct me if I'm wrong, because I am not a teacher. It's an individual education plan, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So you literally just built an individual learning experience for that individual. And it probably has to do with someone who has special needs. So that also ties in to UDL. So there's so many ways that ties in from my perspective as somebody looking at this. If you wrote it up that way, create individual learning experiences to maximize accessible learning, and then just keep it short. Don't go off on a tangent like I just did, but keep it short and succinct. And that's because that's individual learning.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys think, Kenna, Vic? On that
I
yeah,
may pop in to add into the individualized learning experience, as I can see that you are the education specialist. That also tells me that you were the leader for the most part in these IEP meetings. And as instructional designers, we are program managers, and a course is not complete without all stakeholders. So I would spell out the whole word individual education plans to let the hiring team know that you were the program manager but you collaborated with all stakeholders. That includes, just like you created an IEP, so that we can see that you are highly capable of collaboration and individualization for students.
That's a good point. You're right, because especially many special educators, they're the ones who are running those meetings. So you have, like you said, you have parents, and if it's a very litigious meeting, you have lawyers, you have advocates, and then depending on the needs the students have, you could have speech therapists in there, you can have occupational therapists, you can have psychs in there. So you could have meetings of like ranging from 10 to 15 people. And I've had meetings like these in the past where you have to schedule everybody. You're scheduling parents, you're scheduling mom and dad, you're scheduling everybody else. You have to make sure all the paperwork is out correctly. Everybody's filling in their things in the document, especially in the IEP, because you're the program manager, you're the case holder, or case holder, I should say, and you're making sure everybody has their parts in there, so that when the IEP meeting happens, everything's there, and then parent doesn't come in and say, "Oh well, why is this missing? What's going on here? Why is this?" That's a great point, Vic, to put in there and to change that language. Kenna, is there anything else you want to add or speak to or elaborate on with that?
Not specifically. I want to echo everything that all three have said so far. The only thing that I would really add is if there are things dependent on what type of industry you want to enter, because instructional design can be, in any industry, then I would look at the job descriptions for positions in those industries, because they might be looking for something specific. We have the lens of higher education where a lot of this stuff does transfer very, not easily, but you can make those connections pretty easily. So if there is something that, in an industry of maybe the medical industry, or if you want to work for a government organization or something like that, if there's something that appears in those job descriptions a lot, I would look for ways to kind of adjust your experience to fit that. Because again, that's what the hiring managers, that's what the applicant tracking system or AI, whatever tools they're using, those are the keywords that they're going to be looking for on your resume. So you want to be able to kind of shape and massage whatever experience you have to fit that, if it does fit whatever the requirements are for those types of positions.
And that kind of,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr.
And the point, sorry about that. And what Kenna brought up, I just want to kind of piggyback on that for a second, because that's hugely important, because we're not exaggerating what you did. Because if you were in a meeting with 15 people that have lawyers, speech therapists, teachers, parents, all that, that's a big deal. That's a lot to manage. And you just have to state that within the language of whatever job you're going for. So you're not changing anything that you did. You're just stating it in a language that people connect with, comprehend how it connects with what they're doing. Because that is so important. And that's why I just want to echo what Kenna said about find those keywords and then see how what you did connects with that, and then use those keywords. That's so big. And with resume inflation, that's not resume inflation when you do what if you had a 15, if you scheduled everything with 15 people, that you're not inflating anything, you're not exaggerating, you're just being honest and using the language that you need to use for the audience. So people should think of it like that.
That's really good. Yeah. So just to recap real fast, because we've talked about a lot of things. Make sure you have the keywords for the AI processing system so that your resume goes through. Make sure it's formatted well so that when it comes up and somebody looks at it like Kenna or Vic or yourself, Dr. Hanshaw, it catches your eye. It's appealing. Okay, cool. I want to look at this one. Then, depending on what job you're applying for, match your resume to the job description that you're applying for and to match that language. So then when you guys recommend, if I'm applying to these jobs as an educator, maybe I'm applying to a corporate position, maybe I'm applying to a higher ed position, should I make not necessarily make a new resume, but keep the same format and tailor each resume to the language matching to that job? Would you recommend creating different resumes for that?
I would, specifically just working in HR, because, if you've created a job for higher ed and then you go apply to work, maybe, I don't know, the FBI or something, a lot of that verbiage that you would use may not necessarily be caught or understood, or even by a human that's reviewing your resume may not relate. So if it's something that you really are passionate about and you really want this job, I would recommend making a resume specifically for it. I know that's a lot of work, but think of it like a cover letter. Most jobs require a cover letter. I know most people have a template and then they go in and change a few minor things to make it more relatable. Your resume can be something similar, but that also speaks to your individual needs and preferences too. There's a lot to be said for kind of researching what industry you want to look or work in and that type of thing before you go out and make 15 different versions of your resume. So that would be my recommendation.
Very cool. So then I have another question for you guys. Let me bring up back this up. Oh, cool. So I know a lot of teachers do create content, especially in the classroom where they have to supplement with the curriculum. They have to, like, you get a curriculum and it doesn't match the needs of all the learners. So you have to supplement, create extra things. You have to change it. You have to kind of change the language and stuff. You make videos, you type scripts. On here, on my old resume, I didn't have any of that here. I didn't put anything. Now, my question to you guys, is it better to put straight links in terms of like, here's a video of what I did? Or is it better to put it on a portfolio and link it to the portfolio? Is there, when you're looking at a resume, do you actually click the portfolio link and go to the portfolio? Or is it better to send that separate? Or what's the best way to go about that as a teacher who's creating all these different things?
You know, that's a very important question. That really dives in deep, because as a teacher, you do a lot. I mean, let's say you do content creation, you do all of that, like you just said, Matthew. And a portfolio is important, because when you get to the hiring stage, the team that's going to hire you is going to look at your portfolio. And one of the reasons, Vic, can I call you out, Vic?
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that Vic was hired is because my boss above me was able to look at the portfolio that she made when she was in her MSIDT program. And when we said, okay, we'd like to move forward with Vic, that's the first thing that he did. He went and he looked and he was impressed by the portfolio, because all the other stuff was fine. He took our word for it, and then he did his due diligence and looked directly at the portfolio, and they got back to me and said, you know, she has a great looking portfolio, because it not only had content that she created, but she explained why she created it, and it was and it was well done. It was very professional looking. So I would say point to the portfolio just because of that.
Is there anything
it gives
else?
you the street cred.
Well, did you guys want to elaborate too, Kenna or Vic? Or actually, you know what? Let me ask Vic, because you're the one who got hired based on that, right? So as teachers, like I just said, you know, how did you format that on? Because we have my resume, we don't have yours, but like, how can you speak to a teacher who's putting that stuff on? Like, how did you put that in your resume? Did you just link it, or how did it look?
Oh, sorry. Well, on my resume, I linked it directly. So, and since everything is accessible via computer, when the person is opening up your resume, they'll link it directly to see what bullet points you put in, and does that match the skill that is visually shown in the portfolio.
That's good.
And the portfolio, it's where it's not just pictures, but it's to say pictures are worth 1,000 words. The portfolio itself can speak out and demonstrate all your skills on there.
Thank you. So then now, Kenna, I have a question for you, because you're our senior instructional designer. Like, do you echo everything everybody's saying as well, or like, nah, they're making stuff up?
No, I definitely agree. I think the portfolio is a great tool, especially if you are a teacher who has created a lot of content, then I highly recommend that. In the instance where maybe you're not creating a whole lot of content, I wouldn't necessarily link like a blank portfolio or one that doesn't have what you're proud of. And again, I know I've mentioned it, but I would also look at the job description for whatever position you're applying for. A lot of instructional design positions do include content creation, but you may not necessarily be interested in that. You may be more interested in the technical side or running an LMS or something like that, where content creation isn't one of the main tasks or skills that you need. So in those cases, I would not necessarily highlight that unless I had something that was really, full with things that I was proud to share. But in the meantime, I would definitely recommend building out a portfolio if that is something that you want to share with potentially, your future workplace or hiring managers.
Thank you, guys. That's a good point. Okay, so then now I'm going to jump to a new question. Let's pull up the resume here real fast. So we have the experience here. My question is, because I've always been told in the past, put up to like your 10 years of work experience. Do you think, again, I've only ever worked in education, right? And many teachers, many of their jobs are in education. A lot of them were instructional aides, just like myself, where they substitute taught for a bit before they went into full-time teaching. Is it better to put in all that experience, or is it better, like you guys said, to just highlight more of your achievements within the most recent jobs? Like, what would be better when you're looking at the resume for you? Like, oh, okay, he did all this or she did all this within this last job, or they have all these years worth of experience in these different jobs. Like, how is it better to format that part? Because right now you see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a lot of jobs. Like, what do you think is better for you to highlight instead? I'm gonna keep it going, Ken. I'm gonna just popcorn you.
No worries. So from an HR perspective, there are a couple different thought processes on this. If you have a lot of jobs, it does establish work history, and it can show, if you don't have work gaps, that's something that employers look for. If you have significant gaps in work history, that is something that they may question. So those things are important. I will say, though, you probably do want to spend more time highlighting what is relatable content. So if you have things that are, like summer jobs or things that are not as professional, maybe don't include those. I think it kind of depends on what position you are applying for and what work history really does relate to that position. So there's a couple different ways to look at it. My best advice is hiring managers, once they do get the top resumes, it's likely just a few. So you want to make sure that you capture their attention right when they're starting to read through your resume. So the top half, even the top third, is where you want to have the most important information, because if they're bored, they're not going to keep reading to the bottom, and they're not going to keep reading through your experience for the past 10 years or whatever's towards the bottom.
That makes sense. So don't put all your, no, I'm just kidding. But basically, like, sorry. Okay, well, again, we keep coming back to tailoring it to the job, right? So what is best going to fit that job? So for us, again, like you said, we work in higher ed. So a lot of this is going to be matching this kind of language here, where, like Dr. Hanson said, take this language and pepper it inside your experience, pepper it in your about me. And then where Vic was talking about, expand more on that. Like, okay, yes, this IEP paperwork, this LMS, this is a lot more involved than people realize, and expand more on, like Vic was saying. Okay, good to know. Thank you. So then same question to everybody else, like Vic, for yourself, I know you have a similar experience to me where you were in education a lot. On your resume, or when you formatted your stuff, did you include this stuff, or were you highlighting only like the main key points in your resume, or what would be best to do as a teacher going into that?
Yes, for that, I did include all my previous work experience for when I was in elementary education, as well as when I was a substitute teacher. But the core chunk of it was my middle school experience, mostly because it was more crucial, since I did much more as the ESL specialist teacher, as well as that's when we also did more blended learning, and there's a keyword, LMS, learning management system. So I expanded all those words out, and I ordered in the importance, because for you, from what you explained, 15 people, I've never been in an IEP meeting that strenuous. So definitely highlight that experience on the top. Like for me, for example, let me see. for me, it was since I was middle school and ESL, my biggest strength from teaching was testing and maintaining records and data analysis. So that was my first bullet point about applying theory and teaching to learning theories to teach my students on testing, as well as data analysis to constantly monitoring my students' data. And for you, the same applies. It's just we had different skills, but they all directly apply towards ID goals. So again, like first bullet point should definitely be something about IEP, and second bullet point, learning management system, because it's not an easy task maintaining what 30, 100 students you might have, as well as managing all those IEPs at the same time.
No, you're right. That's a great point where you said you highlighted your strengths in your teaching. You said, hey, I was good at this, and this is how it translates to the ideal world. So like, okay, I was good at assessments. So for us in higher education, assessment is huge, especially with instructional designers. You're like, let's just go back to these skills, right? For the ADDIE model, you're assessing and researching and evaluating the course constantly. So if you're a teacher who is good at developing assessments, good at developing those lesson plans, you're going to want to highlight that first thing. And it goes back to what Kenneth said. I don't want to get bored as I'm reading this. Like, oh, there's nothing related to me. Like, what? Goodbye. You know what I mean? But, oh, this job requires, I need somebody who can research and evaluate. Boom, it's right there. I created these assessments to evaluate my learners. This is what it looked like. And then it points to your portfolio in there. And then it talks about this. Right.
Yeah.
So then, go ahead, Vic. Yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but I was just echoing what you're explaining, because if you just casually put an IEP, Ken and Joe would be like, what's an IEP? Mm-hmm. You have to match the verbiage and explain what it is and why it is so crucial that you were the program manager for all of these IEPs, and as well as the LMS admin for your own Google Classroom. So, and they would be like, oh, we need to hire this guy. He is a perfect program manager. He already knows how to manage an LMS as well.
Yeah. See, I got a new job, you guys. So then, Dr. Hanshaw, with like all these, was there anything else you want to add to that, or echo, or like, the floor is yours?
Well, yeah, echo all of it, of course, because that's some really good stuff. And just one other, and then I have a question too for everybody. Yeah. And if people are watching this, I would love to hear what you have to say about it in the comments after I ask it as well. Yeah, so let's talk about assessment for a second. So it's really evaluate program effectiveness. And you would probably see that in a job description. So able to evaluate program effectiveness, do a little research. You'd learn that if you're going for industry, they're probably going to look at Kirkpatrick's model, whether it's the 4 or 5 steps to it. Just say evaluate programs according to Kirkpatrick's 4 levels, 5 levels, whatever they have in the thing, because some people say 4, some people say 5. But boom, you just tailor that because you did that, especially with IEPs, like all that expertise that you have, Matthew, with IEPs. That's what you did. You evaluated the program at the end of the year. And you do that a lot as an ID. So you want to just use that terminology like that a lot and connect it to industry terms if you're going for industry. So Kirkpatrick is within industry. If you're doing higher education, you're not going to worry about the Kirkpatrick model for evaluation. But the question is, what's that?
No.
Oh man, I'm talking too much. So
no, you're not. You're perfect. This is exactly what we need to hear.
Then my question would be, so up on your first one for experience, you started everything with a verb. And then the one below that, it was like, man, I'm around teachers. I better get this right. Is the second one more nouns or adjectives underneath that one on the second and third experience? So do we want to make them like instructional, like learning objectives? Do we want to start them with verbs? Is my question that I would ask. So if anybody is watching this, I'd love to see your thoughts down in the comments. And I'd love to hear your comments as well from your experience. Should they be verbs to start everything else?
I don't know. I'm asking you guys. So
I'll jump in. Yeah, I think that they should be verbs, and that does cut down some of the language that you have to put in your resume instead of I did this. Just here's what I did. Here's why it's important. Really clear, like a learning objective almost. And you have that verb and why it would matter for the position or for your experience and all of those things. So I think it does help if you have that mindset when you're writing your resume to get your point across, be very clear in what you did. And like I said, it does kind of eliminate the need for some of that extra language or even extra words in there. So you can fit more on your resume potentially. or whatever you need to do. It might just help you organize it a little bit better.
That's a good point. So then, is that actually that, and it is all linking too, because you talked about matching it to the job description. You can take verbs from that description that match your experience, that match the job, and then you put it on your resume. Mind blown. Okay. I mean, it's not. You don't go to school to write resumes. You know what I mean? It's not something. It's not really intuitive for a lot of people. You have to think through this process. So I think these are great tips that everybody's giving. Vic, did you want to speak to that as well?
Yeah, definitely. It's resume writing as a process. You echoing what Kenna said is look at the job industry first, or the industry you're applying to, and tailor it, because teaching experience can, I wouldn't say it's a perfect fit, but there are lots of things that teachers are expert at that can translate and be a great match for whatever it's applying. For example, like if your skill was in LMS, then echo on that most, pinpoint all about the LMS. Or if you are into learning experience design, like the IMD process, probably highlight out all the skills that you did where you created the creativity and all engagement for your classrooms.
Awesome, thank you. So I have two final questions before we wrap up. So one thing that Dr. Henshaw talked about, where he was talking about theory, because a lot of teachers have a lot of theoretical knowledge, theoretical, like, you know, that picture where you see the tip of the iceberg and then there's like a big iceberg underneath, that's a lot of teachers. We're using a lot of these theories to guide our classroom. Should we put, or a teacher who's looking to transition ID, should we put the theories that we're using in our description or in the about me or in skills, or should it be put on the resume in general? Like, what do you guys think about that?
That is an interesting question. That is very interesting. And for me, I would tie it in somehow. I wouldn't make it like a standalone, but I would definitely tie it in so they could see that, like, for instance, if you have an IEP where behavior modification is part of it, well, that's the behaviorism, the learning theory of behaviorism, right? So I would tie in behaviorism. Constructivism is allowing people to, or prompting people to kind of expand on their previous experience and build on that experience through experimentation and such. So I would say, yeah, allowed, use that verb, facilitated exercises for students to construct their knowledge utilizing their past and current experiences or something like that. So I think that I like that idea personally as a hiring manager, because then I can see how they're tying everything to the bigger picture. Because, like, can I pick on you, Kenna, for a minute? Kenna does an amazing job being able to take all this content from people, tie it to the larger theoretical picture, and creating something that is an amazing learning experience. And that's how she does it. She gets this stuff from the subject matter expert who, they're experts. They're great at what they do. But then Kenna takes all that, ties it in with learning theory, and makes an amazing learning experience. So it's a big deal to me personally as a hiring manager. I would love to hear, again, what people thought about that in the comments too. But I think that's That's Kenna's superpower. Kenna's got a superpower. She wears a cape when she goes into her meeting with Smeeve, and then has a fan that blows the cape back, so she looks like a superhero going in. That's her superpower. So
Yeah.
I would. That's a long way of saying I would.
That's a good explanation. Ken and Vic, what do you guys think?
Can jump in. Thank you so much, George. I really appreciate that. I think I definitely agree. I think that you can kind of tailor what you're doing in the classroom to fit those theories, and it is something that does stand out when your hiring manager is, or whoever is reviewing your resume. It shows that you are familiar with the language, the theories, and those types of things, which kind of do transfer whatever, regardless of what industry you're trying to work in. But I would, again, just review the job description and see what they're looking for. That's my biggest tip, I think, to everyone watching. It really depends on what they're looking for, because you can have all this great experience, but if it's not communicated well on your resume in a way that they're able to connect to and understand, then it unfortunately may not matter. So I would refer back to whatever the job description is or industry standard and go from there.
So you don't want to be the greatest thing never discovered.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Vic,
So
did you-
Matthew,
Oh,
can I turn the
go
tables
ahead.
on you for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
You came from teaching, and you have your own set of superpowers here with all that you do, and you could really see how you connect with everybody that you meet with outside of just our team, but outside with all the other teams and all the other stakeholders, even outside of LAPU. What's the biggest thing that you think you brought over from teaching?
Relationships. I think that might highlight that, because a lot of jobs, especially with the ID world, you're collaborating with different people, you're collaborating with those stakeholders. So, and as a teacher, you're working with your team, you're working with the principal, you're working with the vice principal, all the admins. And then now, not only special educators, but general education as well. You have so many students who have IEPs in your classroom. So you have to work with everybody, or the classroom is not going to work at all. Even though you're alone in the classroom, you're that one person teaching, you're still working within a greater ecosystem to make sure it functions properly. You need to know who's on campus. You need to know who's there. You need to know the next door neighbor teacher. Like even if you have to go to the bathroom, like, okay, hey, I gotta go 5 minutes. Can you watch your class? So you have to have good relationships. Otherwise, your teaching experience is gonna be very draining as a teacher. So I would say one of my greatest things that I didn't even highlight in my resume, because that was a good point that Vic brought up, like highlight your strengths, is that collaboration piece, that communication piece that we have to do as teachers, because it's so huge. And as an ID, or just in the ID world, you're working with so many different people to make this whole engine move. It's so many moving parts, and you're playing one role. But your one role connects to this, connects to that, connects to that. So you have to talk with these people. Otherwise, there's going to be something missing. And it goes back to another thing that Vic said as well, is project management, right? Teachers are phenomenal at that, whether they realize it or not. And that's something I did a lot too, that I didn't even really highlight there. So managing these meetings, managing those things, I think that would be my biggest takeaway for myself. And then anybody watching too, is like, you're doing a lot more than you think. Take some time to think about your strengths and how it translates to the job description. to the job description, because Ken is right. You don't want to apply to a job and all these strengths are like, well, I'm not even looking for that. I'll see you later. Bye. And then make sure all this information is packaged nice and neatly. So when it gets to Dr. Hanshaw, he looks at it and he's like, oh, this is beautiful. You're hired right away. So all those things put together, will get you the job. I don't know if that answered your question or not. Yeah, hopefully it did.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So then, are there any final tips or tricks or anything you would want to add as an end note? Anybody?
Well, maybe the next time if we do an interview one, we can talk about that too. Different stuff, presenting yourself, because we're presenting ourselves with that first impression with a resume. Maybe we can follow on with interview tips.
Yeah,
That's
Which
true.
would be
And then
awesome.
we could also do one for our portfolio. So if you're watching and you're like, oh man, I don't even have a portfolio. How do you make one?
Yeah.
Well, maybe we're gonna do another one too. Stay tuned.
Mhm.
Click that like button, subscribe. You'll see all of a sudden you'll see on your page how to make a portfolio for teachers, how to interview. You heard it first from our boss man. We're doing it. No, yeah, that's a good point. Anybody else? Anything else you want to add? No. Cool, awesome. So then we want to ask you too, our amazing viewers. Like Dr. Hansel said, are there any skills we missed? Is there any way that this resume could be even better? What tips do you have? And if so, just go ahead and share them in the comments. And like I mentioned before, please subscribe, hit the like button. We have more content coming your way. And then I have one last question for everybody too. If you're a teacher or really anybody wanting to transition to ID and you're not sure where to start, or you're looking for a program to help develop your skills, well, we have it here for you. Here at LEPU, we have our Masters in Instructional Design and Technology program. It's self-paced. You work when it fits your schedule, and it's extremely affordable. So if you want more information, you can scan the QR code on the screen, or you can email us at msidt@lepu. So thanks for talking with us today. And remember, this is what learning feels like.